So what would you say is the major misconception that people have today about the real estate space?
For me, one of the misconceptions that people have is that there's a lot of profit in development.
Hi everyone, my name is Loretta and welcome to another episode of Industry by Mustard Insights, where we take a deep dive into the industries under our radar. Today we are going to be looking at the real estate landscape, and I have here with me the founder and CEO of Highrarchy Investment and Technology Limited, Mr. Nnamdi Ijei. Pleased to have you on the show.
Thank you, Loretta. Hi, everyone. I am very pleased to be here and excited as well.
Awesome.
I look forward to an awesome show.
Great. So we typically start off our shows by dissecting a data point. Now, there's news that there is around a 22 to 28 million housing deficit in terms of units in Nigeria. What do you have to say about that? What do you think about that?
Okay, that figure has been growing over the years. Once upon a time, it was 20 million. And over the years, it has grown to 22 million. And I think fundamentally, that stems from a structural challenge. Is it a housing deficit, an independent problem, or it's powered by an economic problem? So yes, I think it exists, but to solve that problem, you need to be more fundamental in your approach while looking at what opportunities can be created within the economy while solving that problem.
Yeah, so to break that down a little bit, I mean, we see that there are a lot of houses. I mean, look at Ikoyi, you see there's a lot of houses that are empty. Maybe there's a court case or something like that. So is it really a housing deficit, or is it that the houses that are available are not being occupied and then we are building more to accommodate some people that are not showing up?
Okay, yeah, so legal tussles add to the final costs of delivering real estate to the people. There seems to be, or there's evidence that there are gluts in some sections of the industry, especially the highbrow centers of the city. So we have gluts in those spaces, while we have an unwillingness for people to stay in the suburbs, in the outskirts of the city, because of a disparity between population growth compared to infrastructural growth. So that creates these fundamental problems that we speak about. So people are desirous of housing, but they can't afford housing where they desire to stay. So ultimately, or that situation ends up creating the complexity in which we experience today. But in my view, it is as much a problem as it is an opportunity. So stakeholders within the industry can ride on this opportunity and enumerate some of the issues that can be tackled and start solving them one after the other. This requires stakeholder interactions, requires deliberate conversations, requires step-by-step strategic input and analysis, then coming up with a grand plan to tackle the short-term, mid-term, and long-term issues that would emanate, because of course there are going to be secondary as well as residual issues that spawn out of whatever solution you're implementing.
Yeah. So for those who don't know about Highrarchy Investment and Technology Limited, specifically what you do with the Blissville trademark, knowing that you've delivered homes to scores of people in Nigeria, how can you describe what the company does and what separates it from any other real estate company in Nigeria?
Wonderful question. I really love that. Highrarchy, spelled Highrachy intentionally, because the goal is to raise people on the hierarchy of the social wealth order. And while we're doing that, to avail them with some level of balance and peace of mind. And that is why the brand Blissville, that's where the brand Blissville stemmed from. So the objective of the brand is to give people, stakeholders, balanced value while they endure and enjoy peace of mind. So how do we try to achieve this? We try to achieve this using some core principles. That's by delivering an acronym that we call QWIS, QWIS, which stands for quality, wellness, innovation, and sustainability, which we project ultimately when one sorts out the problem of habitation. Then you now need to consider, how do you sustain that habitation while balancing the other factors of life, including wellness, costs, tracking the very dynamic innovation, technological innovation trajectory of the world, and all these facets. So our goal is to blend them together, add in the architectural, socioeconomic, and other considerations that seem to be watered down when the primary objective of an industry is profits. So add them back and do stuff that are core and viable for the human experience. That's what we pride ourselves in, and that's what we chase. That's our challenge.
Knowing that you've delivered tons of homes, you've delivered scores of homes to individuals in Nigeria, what would you say separates a Blissville home from that of any other company?
Thank you for that question. I think fundamentally our core objective, which revolves around delivering peace of mind to the stakeholders, compels us to focus on a number of core attributes, which include the legal title of the land. Is it bankable? Is it traceable? Also, the layout of the layout of the property. Is it child friendly? Does it promote good air quality? Does it promote efficient natural lighting? Does it enhance the living experience of the occupants? And last, definitely not least, very important, the location. So how does the environment, accessibility, complement the projected and desired lifestyle that the occupants and owners are trying to enjoy?
Awesome. So just to take it broader a bit, so broadly speaking, what would you say is the market size of residential real estate in Nigeria?
So you mean, generally speaking, what
Yeah,
is the
broadly
size
speaking.
of the Nigerian residential real estate market?
Exactly.
That's an interesting question. I think if you do a bit of research, the data online would gear you towards a bit over $2 trillion,
Okay.
which in itself is an indication of something which can be interpreted both ways, as a positive or as a negative.
How can that be negative?
Because of the sheer size. You spoke about the housing deficit earlier on during the interview.
Yeah.
That housing deficit is an opportunity. So that size of the residential real estate can expand to a much larger amount when it comes to value terms. There are several aspects of residential real estate that countries can use to stimulate economic indices. But these aspects need to be tied together strategically.
Yeah. Okay. So, but what would you say are some of the major challenges that Nigeria's residential real estate is facing?
I like that question. There are a ton. There are so many of them. There's infrastructural access. There's title transfers and registration, the time that it takes. There's inflationary effects on both the building materials as well as the general cost of delivering construction. There are a ton of problems. But like I said, if strategically addressed, the solutions can tie together to give a broader outlook to strategic economic growth of the nation.
All right, interesting perspectives. So, in tackling some of the questions, let's even look at mortgage, for example. Nigeria's mortgage penetration is below 1%, and we know that a lot of developed countries are above 50%. So, what is the implication of this for us in Nigeria?
That's a good question. When it comes to mortgage, there are several factors that control it, one of which is the inflation rate. So ultimately, as an implication, like I said earlier on, it means that a lot of opportunity is still lying out there. I don't think that as stakeholders in the industry, we should look at these problems as problems. I think there are a lot of opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And where we'll be creating a disservice to ourselves as a nation is when we feel that we can just adopt a solution that has been implemented out there. There are many countries, many of the developed countries that have mortgage penetration or a mortgage to GDP ratio that exceeds 50%. But ours is still below 1%.
1%,
so
yeah.
Is this a problem or is it a symptom? And if it's a symptom of a problem, what is the problem or what are the problems? And how do we convert those into solutions, hereby creating an opportunity? Stakeholder engagement is key. The conversations need to start rolling. And there are a lot of
Factors?
There's a lot of value that can be unplugged from trying to solve this problem. One of them is long-term capital. So it's solving your mortgage problem unlocks a lot of things. It creates wealth for the middle class. It powers several sectors of the economy, including the construction sector, financing, materials, so material manufacturing, services within the industry, technology, and by just unlocking one issue, your economy can have a multiplier effect. So if you look at the rebasing that was done recently, the real estate sector now has become more relevant in the Nigerian economy.
Yeah.
That is an indicator. I believe the Nigerian government is trying to address it. The previous governments have done some things. The current government is doing more, or is doing some more. But ultimately, they will take some time. It will take some time, and also a lot more needs to be done. There are opportunities for diaspora collaborations, because there has to be the mental or knowledge inputs that should come in, but there must be a realignment with the realities that we are faced in the country. And when this is attained, we would all marvel at how the ripple effect it will have on the economy and the lives of the average Nigerian.
Okay, now to get into some of the tea, some of the real questions. We've seen videos where people say, look at the price of this house in Lekki versus the price of this other house in New York or in Brazil. You know, what would you say is the cost of the disparity, first, between income distribution versus the cost of homes, and also just the general inflation of houses, specifically in Lagos and Abuja?
Okay, let me try and recontextualize your question. What you're asking is the prices of houses in Lagos and Abuja are skyrocketing.
Right.
That is a question on its own.
Yes.
Then is there a question about why are the prices of houses in Lagos, why do they seem high compared to similar metropolitan cities across the world?
Exactly.
Okay, let me start with the first one. Housing is a sensitive topic because it's one of the fundamentals of life. They say the three major requirements are housing, clothing, and food.
Yeah.
So there's an expectation that it would behave independent of the other economic indices, or there's a desire or a need for it to behave independent of the other economic indices, but that's not usually the case. So we've had very high inflationary figures over the past few years, and that has impacted food, has impacted logistics, has impacted health, has impacted all other industries. It will also impact housing. Now, in Lagos and Abuja, that coupled with the fact that we naturally tend to migrate to metropolitan cities as Homo sapiens, so the migration rates towards Lagos and Abuja is higher. So that also would add an additional load or an additional burden on the real estate industry. And there are many economic calculations and analysis that have not been done, more or less. So, for instance, who is middle class in Nigeria?
Yeah.
Is the 19-year-old content creator that makes $3,000 a month member of the middle class? So food for thought.
Yeah.
So when we are trying to analyze the demand pool for the metropolitan cities, we need to look at it squarely and say, okay, this is the actual funds that is chasing these figures. And plus, remember that the government has tried to find a way to use hospitality to stimulate part of the economy, especially in Lagos. And that's made real estate investments in some parts of Lagos gear towards more like short-let Airbnb investments as opposed to long-let annual rentals. So that has attracted some more. It has attracted some more investors, but it has also increased the demand astronomically.
Pressures.
So these variables interacting would cause that kind of effect. To simplify it, if you look at what a bottle of soft drink costs in 2020 and you compare it to what a bottle of soft drink costs today, you would see that there's a relationship between that and how prices of real estate has been skyrocketing. And to answer your second question, which is why are houses in Nigeria so expensive when there's no infrastructure compared to similar houses in other parts of the country that have infrastructure?
Or the world.
Of the world that have better infrastructure. We'll get there. The absence of good infrastructure doesn't delete the demand. So communities that are highbrow should be defined by the quality of life. However, in some parts of the world, it's also defined by who is your neighbor. So that aspirational twist to the whole demand equation can create this type
Even
of,
without the requisite value. Because sometimes it's not so much about the infrastructure of the place, it's also the value within the home itself. So you see a building, maybe it has a tiny pool, but it has like 7 bedrooms and it's a massive duplex. And then you see the one you're comparing it with, and it's it's much bigger, it's much finer, so.
And so bigger, finer, there are other yardsticks now.
Yeah,
What's the cost of the finishing?
Yeah.
So if you are comparing a marble floored house with a house that has normal tiles, there's a disparity. Depending on how the environment is, if you're trying to manage noise, it would have an effect on the type of glazing you use for your windows and things like that. So, there are several indices that add up to create the bulk figure that we're calling the costs of the house. There's the legal costs. There's a house that has good title is sometimes more than 50% more expensive in the same location in Nigeria than a house that the title has not been tidied up.
So we've heard of situations where people pay for shell units and then upon completion, there's no profit for developers because prices of everything has gone up. So how do you plan this risk, this inflationary risk pressures with the projects?
So while planning your projects, you have to be very critical about the model that you're going to use. What's the financing structure you're going to use? And most importantly, how are you going to manage your procurement? Are you going to buy in bulk ahead of time and warehouse to hedge against the cost of certain items skyrocketing? Are you going to have forward contracts with your vendors? But most importantly, the speed. You have to match your plan with the speed at which you are delivering without compromising the quality of the delivery. It's very important that we emphasize and overemphasize that you do not compromise the quality of the delivery, from the engineering to the aesthetics. There is a minimum standard that anybody should embrace.
Yeah, so we've spoken about inflation, but to go further into that, what role does FX play in all of this? Is it that because are we importing a lot more materials?
Sure, it's the one of the variables that impacts inflation in Nigeria is the FX variable. So, and of course, we know we're highly import dependent, so that would always play a role. And it's not just it's the volatility of the indices.
Yeah.
So the volatility of the instability of the currency value, the volatility of the inflation rate. So it's not just the incremental effect of the inflation, it's also the fact that it's unstable. It makes planning difficult. So as a developer, your best bet is to plan your projects in a way that you can make it modular and scalable in a way that you manage the time related factor.
So over the past few years, and I think this is something that's happened for a long time, there's been a lot of building collapse, collapsed buildings in Lagos, a bunch of other cities. Can you speak to what's going on?
There are many causes, there are many things that can cause a building to be structurally unstable or eventually collapse. But a lot of them can be prevented by proper engineering. I think a number of the stakeholders within the industry have done some things to try to address this unforgivable issue, because ultimately it leads to loss of human life. So it's the most unforgivable aspect of the industry. But I think regulations has evolved to try to address that,
Yeah.
as well as there's a sort of invisible hand within the industry that is making the developers a bit more sensitive to the quality, and that's why we always hammer on quality. However, to address this issue fundamentally, operators within the industry should not move forward without carrying the qualified specialists along. There are engineers, there are surveyors, there are different experts within the industry that have key roles to play during the process of providing usable real estate spaces to the populace. And these stakeholders need to be respected, regarded, and listened to during the process. If you do a deep dive into some of the individual events, you would see that some of the professionals or the developers or the individual stakeholders were culpable in the matter. But it doesn't happen without a cause that can be prevented professionally. So my advice to everyone within the industry is just to make sure that competent experts, the whole array of competent experts, were used during the project.
Okay, so on the back of that, in terms of affordable housing, so there are two ways to look at it. On one hand, we could say that some certain irresponsible developers could skip on some quality measures because they are trying to manage costs in a bid to have better margins. So that's one angle to take it from. On the other hand, is affordable housing actually possible in Nigeria, and what are the elements that could make it work?
That's the most asked question in the industry, everybody wants to solve the affordable housing problem. And believe you me, I'm convinced that a lot of the suppliers within the industry are also interested in solving that problem. But there are several factors that govern the approach. One of which is that whatever you are doing entrepreneurially needs to be sustainable.
Yeah.
So, to ask your question, is it possible to solve affordable housing problem? Yes. What would make it easier? Strategic partnership between the supply stakeholders and the government. The individual factors that create the product, including the land, the construction, the financing, and all that, the distribution, each of these can be solved individually. The government has a role to play, the developers have a role to play, the financing institutions have a role to play. If they can strike a perfect balance, you can get what you desire. However, in the current climate, it's still possible, but there has to be an element of creativity, and you might not get the city centers where everybody wants to be. You want to have close proximity to the commercial hubs of the state. So how do you strike a balance between proximity and affordability? That's where the problem is.
Okay. And maybe the focus is that, or maybe the challenge rather, is that we are focusing too much on Lagos and Abuja. So where would you say are other cities that do not have the same level of migration demand that we have in Lagos and Abuja that we can now look into?
To look into in what aspects? Is it investment opportunity, or as an investor, or is it migration opportunity? So other spaces in the country that people should look out for would be, for different reasons, would be somewhere like Ibadan. Ibadan has always been Ibadan. It's an old city. It has population. The infrastructure from Lagos to Ibadan is constantly being upgraded. So there's real estate opportunities getting up there. Then you have the spillover communities, Shagamu, Abeokuta. Those always will benefit from the Lagos migration pool. Then if you want to gear a bit out of the southwest and look at, you should look at somewhere like Port Harcourt. Port Harcourt has always been the oil-rich city, but aside that, in recent times there has been an increase in the infrastructure of the state. So they have the locations are a bit more accessible. Yeah. You should also consider Uyo. Uyo is a hospitality diamond. So Uyo is good. Uyo too has wonderful infrastructure. Asaba is like benefiting a lot because of its strategic location. There's that access road that's connecting south-south and southeast. So yeah, Asaba benefits from that. Onisha benefits from that. Then yeah, if we go into the southeast, I like Enugu. Enugu is prime. It's ripe for investment. Enugu, yeah, you can look at. It depends on what your goals are or objectives are, or how you intend to finance the opportunity. Aba is also a boarding place. the body language of the government and the people seem to be tuned to a positive angle. And up north, there's still people there. So you still have the usual suspects when it comes to infrastructure. Kaduna has done a lot of work. Kano still has its, yeah. So that's about it.
Awesome. So basically, there's a lot of options. So what would you say is the major misconception that people have today about the real estate space?
I like that question. Interesting question. I would say for me, one of the misconceptions that people have is that there's a lot of profit in development. And you see the behavioral patterns of stakeholders from suppliers to the government. Everybody feels there's a lot of profit in real estate development, and they're trying to check that. However, when you gear into the industry, you will now find out the reality. It requires lots of discipline and professionalism for you to be able to be sustainable.
So now for our final question, I would like you to make a key prediction about the real estate space.
Prediction.
Say in the next 10 years.
There's the usual suspects that the relevance of technology would increase across most industries. So as we gear towards solving the deficit issue, there will be a new issue that will probably come out, which is the lifestyle issue. So in my view, people that use technology-driven solutions to enhance the living experience of the average Nigerian would be smiling to the bank.
So smart solutions.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So this has been a very amazing episode. It has been insightful for me, and I hope that it has been as rewarding for you watching it. Thank you so much to our guests.
You're welcome.
I've learned a whole lot. So that's it for this episode of Industry by Mustard Insights. I hope you had a great time watching this. Until next time, please check out our other videos, and looking forward to the next one. Bye.